Good evening. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, St. Cloud area, welcome to this forum featuring candidates for State Legislative District 14. District 14 is represented in the Minnesota legislature by one senator and two representatives, one each for District 14A and District 14B. This event is being conducted at the Whitney Senior Center, a facility that is owned and operated as community service by the City of St. Cloud. We thank the Whitney Center staff for making arrangements to conduct this forum here. We are pleased that St. Cloud State University Gerontology students and the SCSU Gerontology Club are co-sponsoring this forum with us. We are recording this forum and will upload it to our YouTube channel. A link to the recording will be put on our website. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. This means we do not support or oppose particular political parties or individual candidates, but we do study and take positions on issues. We sponsor candidate forums because we believe informed citizens are the foundation of democracy. I am Linda South, a member of the St. Cloud Area League, and I will moderate this forum. Susan Smith and Diane Bublitz will be the timekeepers. We moderate candidate forums according to a standard protocol that is designed to be fair and open. The candidates have accepted the format in advance. Audience members, you received a summary of the forum procedures as follows. And I'm going to read what you have in your hand. No campaign or partisan materials, signs, buttons, literature, or printed apparel may be worn, displayed, or distributed in the forum room. Such materials can be offered on a table provided outside. Please silence personal devices such as cell phones and pagers. The League of Women Voters St. Cloud area reserves the right to tape and photograph this event and publish the results. Audience members, except for authorized persons, should refrain from using any electronic devices to record this forum. Anyone doing so in a way that is disruptive or distracting may be asked to leave. Questions will come from the audience in written form on the cards provided. Question facilitators will receive, sort, and forward audience questions to the moderator. Questions of a related nature may be condensed and combined. The questions must be brief, and lengthy statements will not be accepted. Questions should relate to specific issues the candidates would normally address as public officials in this particular office. Questions on unrelated topics or of a personal nature will not be allowed. All questions become the property of League of Women Voters, St. Cloud area. All candidates will be given a chance to answer each question. Participants are asked to remain quiet while candidates are speaking so that everyone can hear responses. All applause will be held until the forum is complete and the moderator invites it. We moderate candidate forums according to a standard protocol that is designed to be fair and open. Candidates have accepted the format in advance. Audience members, you are invited to address questions to the candidates using the cards provided. We also received questions by email from the public in advance. Questions of a related nature will be condensed and combined. All questions must be relevant to specific issues the candidates would normally address as members of the Minnesota legislature. Each candidate will have the opportunity to answer all questions. All District 14 candidates who will appear on the November 8th general election ballot were invited to participate in this forum. And they are Senate District 14, Aric Putnam and Tami, House District 14A, Tami Calhoun and Bernie Perryman, House District 14B, Aaron Henning and Dan Wolgamott. Candidates unable to participate in person tonight were able to submit a 2-minute statement to be read at this forum. We have received a candidate statement from Dan Wolgamott, which I will read now. To the League of Women Voters, my fellow elected officials and candidates and members of the public, thank you for the invitation to participate in tonight's candidate forum. Due to my obligations as a 9th grade football coach, I regret that I am unable to join you as I am required to be in St. Francis to coach my team in a game. I'm running for re-election as a police-endorsed, pro-choice, proud, moderate Democrat with a successful record of working with lawmakers from both parties to get things done for St. Cloud. Representative Dan Wolgamott. I am pleased to welcome and introduce the candidates participating in this event who are seated in alphabetical order by office. Aric Putnam and Tami Calhoun. The candidates' opening statements will be offered in the order they are seated. After that, the order for answering will be rotated. Candidates, you will each be allowed the following amounts of time. 1 minute for an opening statement, 1.5 minutes to answer each question from the audience, and 1 minute for a closing statement at the end of the question and answer period. A timekeeper will hold up a yellow card when you have 30 seconds left. The red card that says time means finish your sentence and stop. State legislators have 2 important responsibilities: to both represent their districts and to enact laws that pertain to Minnesota as a whole. Senators are elected for 4-year terms and representatives serve 2-year terms. Candidates, we are ready to begin with opening remarks. You each have 1 minute to state why you are seeking the office of Minnesota legislator. And we will begin with Aric Putnam.
Well, thank you to the League and to all of you who are here today, all of you who showed up. And I know it's traditional for politicians to talk about themselves a lot, but I don't want to do that. I want to talk about us. We've been through a pretty difficult couple of years, but we are a strong community. And we're strong because we show up for each other. And we show up all the time. We work hard, we value each other, we shovel each other's sidewalks. I guess I won't be shoveling Joe's sidewalk. But we do, we stand up for each other, we show up and we work hard, and we deserve people in the legislature who also show up and who also work hard. We deserve that, and we need it now more than ever. So our area is positioned in a very strange place in the state of Minnesota. We're not a rural area, we're not the cities. We're in between, and so often we get lost. I've seen that over the past 2 years in St. Paul during my service, serving you. We need legislators who show up and work hard for our community because we are in between, because we're not cities, because we're not a rural area, because we can't be left behind. So I thank you all for being here today, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. I'm going to try to keep it as cordial as possible with Tami. Too pretentious.
Tami. I'm a teacher who taught 34 years in the St. Cloud Public Schools, 30 years as Tamara Cole Campion, or Miss KC. During that time, I served as my department chair and representing my building on the Representative Assembly at SCEA. I've launched and run 2 small businesses, Perfect Cut and Physicians Revenue Services. I have been a leader with Grip Isaiah, a nonprofit, faith-based organization focused on changing policies on issues of education, transportation, healthcare, and racial justice, working on these community issues for over 20 years, advocating several times in St. Paul and also at our nation's capital. I served 7 years on the board of my church. I was chair of the Personnel Committee and now serve on the Mission Committee, which supports many of our local community organizations. And I served 3 years on the board of Friends of PAB, raising funds for educating children in Pakistan. I'm a mother of 2 children, graduated from Tech in St. Cloud State. I spent years with Scout troops and involved with tech sports, and my husband Dan and I have 4 children and are expecting our first grandchild in January.
And your first question. And this will be for you, Tami, to start. What is your motivation to run for this office? What are your qualifications and experience that make you a good candidate for Minnesota Legislative District 14?
Well, my motivation is the community. I worked for 40 years working with the community, first as a teacher and then as with Isaiah, Grip Isaiah. And as I've been in the community working on education, healthcare issues, advocating either at the city council or at school board meetings or down at the Capitol. I've always had the community at heart and trying to resolve issues and making our community better. So that's what motivates me to run, is working for the betterment of our community.
Aric?
I would second what Tami said. I think it's a really simple question with a really simple answer. The only reason anyone should ever go into public service, the only reason anyone should run for office, is because they care. And they want to make their community stronger. They want to serve other people. That's the only reason anyone should ever go into public service, into office, is to emphasize and understand the nature of service, of working for others. You know, I heard a story in the Senate last session. Tom Bach said to me once, he said, the best thing about the work that we do is that we are improving the lives of people we don't even know yet. That's the only reason why you run for office. That's why I'm running for office. In terms of my qualifications, because I think, Linda, that was the other half of your question. I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for 20 years at St. Ben's and St. John's. One of the things I teach is critical thinking, debate, thinking about how to talk through problems and bring people together to find solutions to those problems. That's something I've done for 20 years as a teacher. And it's something that I've done a little bit, as best as I could in the Senate for the last 2 years. I will have to acknowledge, however, that as being someone who studies critical thinking, sometimes the Senate's a difficult place to be. But all the more reason for me to be there, and all the more reason for me to do that work, because it's too important not to.
Thank you. And the next question, and you will be first, Aric. Given the dual responsibilities of representing your district and working on behalf of the state of Minnesota as a whole, do you think District 14 has any specific challenges? And if so, what are they, and what will you do to address those challenges?
So, yes, I think it's the simple answer to that one too. But I see challenges as opportunities as well. You know, I mentioned earlier when we first began this discussion that St. Cloud is in a very special place, the St. Cloud area is in a very special place in the context of the legislature as a whole. We are in the middle, and that means we can either get forgotten or we can use that space as a space of authority and power, a place to speak about what we need. We have tremendous leverage in this space and in this seat that has not been used in the past until I started to use it. We are in the middle in a way that is very, very useful for us. And I've said this before, and I believe it deep into my heart, is that St. Cloud is more like America than the rest of Minnesota. We have tremendous differences, but we're getting along, we're working them out together. We are a people consciously, deliberately, thinking about our cultural character and our optimistic future, and there is nothing more American than that. And yes, the rest of the state can learn from us about that.
Tami?
Thank you very much. Yes, Aric, very well spoken, as always. I think that this district is very unique in that we are in the middle. We are central Minnesota here. We have a unique combination of community members and populations, and we are growing with that, and we are learning from each other, and I think we're open to learning from each other, and I think that's one of the wonderful things about St. Cloud, is that learning opportunity. Plus the fact that we have so many colleges here, it encourages us to learn more from each other. Also, an advantage of being in central Minnesota is that sometimes we're under the radar, which I think is a good thing, because then we can do what we know is best for us. We, in terms of public safety, some of the things that we've done have worked very well for central Minnesota, and we've been a leader in our public safety. And so when some of the things happened in 2020 down in the cities with George Floyd, we were able to a little bit be under the radar, but yet when some of those concerns came and challenges came to central Minnesota, we were prepared because we had already done the work ahead of time. So we do that. We work hard and we work together and we come together and do what's best for our community.
Thank you. And the next question will be yours first, Tami. What are your views of the electoral system and voting procedures in Minnesota? Any concerns?
The electoral system, yes, I think that there are some concerns recently, well, maybe even over the last 20 years on our electoral system. And I did just recently have a conversation with a group that's working on the national electoral system. And it's a very unique opportunity, I think, for Minnesota to be involved in that. And what they are looking at is that as a presidential election occurs, that all of Minnesota's electoral votes would, if Minnesota agrees to this, we will commit to all of our electoral votes being passed for the president candidate who has the most popular votes in the United States. And I think that that's an excellent option that we are looking at. So I approve that and support that for Minnesota.
Aric?
So I think there are a couple of things we have to acknowledge at the outset when we talk about elections. And the first is that they're done by human beings. People are imperfect. No election has ever been perfect. It's never going to be perfect because it's always done by a person. But the people who do it are great people who are sacrificing their time and energies for the sake of democracy. They're showing up for our democracy. And too often when we talk about election security, we cast aspersions on the character of those people who are doing that work. That kind of paranoia, fear, conspiracy theories about elections. Those aren't about elections, those are about your neighbors who are working the ballots. We need to have faith in each other in order to have faith in our elections. Now, when it comes to actual policies in elections, a lot of things we talk about, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to have a voter ID. It's often a very sloppy argument, frankly, because there are lots of different phases of an election. You have those moments of registration, you have moments of people actually voting, and then you have moments when those things get counted. Those aren't the same thing. Those are different phases of the electoral process. And we have to be serious about all three. There are a couple things specifically that I've actually tried to pass into law that I really like. One of them is registration of high school, tentative, probationary registration of high school seniors in their civics classes. While they're learning about government, let them fill out the paperwork. Doesn't mean they can vote. They'll get a postcard when they should. Also, other ways of expanding registration, because as an election is secure, it must also be as inclusive as possible, and we can't forget that.
Thank you. And Aric, you'll be first this time. Across the state, there are significant disparities in access to quality education, healthcare, childcare, and housing. What, if anything, can the legislature do to address these disparities?
Well, that's an excellent question, but it's also ginormous. Those are three very, very big issues with different manifestations in different parts of the state in really different ways. The one thing that I'd like to go back to, though, is to understand that St. Cloud doesn't get the attention to these issues as we should, because a lot of the resources either go to the cities or they go to greater Minnesota. So when we have organizations that work with our community and in our community, too often they get overlooked because the resources go to other places in the state. So for me, that's the biggest, most important thing. It's not necessarily the immediate aid, but building the organizations in our community who do that aid, who work with these issues, building our local capacity to help each other. We don't need, if we have a housing issue, we don't need the resources to go to a nonprofit in the cities that comes out to help us here. We need those resources to come directly to our community, so that as we are serving the community, we are building our capacity and our ability to serve each other.
Jamie?
Looking at some of the LGA or local government aid, I think that is one area that helps to even the playing field as it goes across Minnesota. Property tax relief, especially spread the wealth across the state. And I think that some of those LGA funds could go to different parts of Minnesota and especially central Minnesota. I know that we've received many LGA funds and it's really helped our St. Cloud area public safety. We need to lift up everybody in the state and not just one part of the state. It's kind of that famous saying, we all do better when we all do better, and I believe that fully. So as we continue working on funds for central Minnesota, we continue to uplift other parts of the state and try to spread that wealth around.
Thank you. Tami, you're first for the next one. The 2022 legislative session adjourned on May 23rd with no agreements on how to invest the multi-billion-dollar surplus. What do you think should be done with this surplus? And what do you think the spending priorities should be in the Minnesota legislature going forward?
I was quite upset when the legislature ended in May. The week before, I was very hopeful. I had seen the agreement between the governor and the Senate and the House on the $9 billion, or more than that, $4 billion going to basically the savings account in the state of Minnesota, the surplus, and $4 billion going back to the taxpayer, and $4 billion going to health and social services. And was very discouraged when time ended. And I'm not going to say time ran out, because I don't believe time ran out. Time just ended with leaving that money on the table. And I talked to so many people at the doors who were counting on that money. The Central Minnesota Children's Museum, our educational system, our childcare system, public safety, our police force, and our firefighters. They were counting on much of that money to be able to invest in their programs. Also in infrastructure and the roads and bridges and rails that we have. We need that money at this point. All of these, most of these organizations are on skeletal budgets. I know in education, we've been cut for almost 20 years. And so there's no fat to turn anymore, and we needed that money. So I'm very disappointed that we did not get use of that money.
Aric.
I'm not a partisan dude in any way, really. And I think that the original compromise was appropriate and reasonable and a product of reasonable minds trying to solve a problem. And I was optimistic that it was going to work out. But this actually happened, friends. This happened. And this is, I'm telling you the story not about Republicans. It's about the establishment elite, the leadership of that party in the Senate right now is irresponsible. We had all of these bills that would take care of all kinds of problems in our community, and they weren't especially expensive. They were themselves already the product of compromise. And they went through the House, had passed. They went through the Senate, had been debated, but instead of being voted on, they were tabled. And then it would have taken us 5 minutes to not spend a tremendous amount of money, but just to be reasonable and responsible. Literally, it would have taken us 5 minutes to do that in the Senate. And at 11:10, on the night we had to adjourn at midnight, Jerry Miller, Senate Majority Leader, put us in recess and waited for no reason, just put us in recess until 11:57 so he could pretend like we worked until midnight. I am still full of rage about that. The original agreement was the right plan. And they'll say it's not a budget year, we didn't have to spend money. As Phyllis knows, 11% of the nursing homes in Minnesota are about to close because we don't compensate people who work in them. That compensation was in that bill. The solutions were in that bill, but we failed.
Thank you. So this next question goes to you first, Aric. What should be the legislative role, if any, in determining school curriculum and what is taught in classrooms throughout the state?
That's already very well established. I mean, I know we have a lot of concerns and complaints, and again, a fair amount of conspiracy and lack of trust for teachers, which I find very disturbing. Some of the things we saw going through the Senate this last time around, that essentially was building on that distrust and that lack of faith in teachers. When all you gotta do is do what we used to do when we were kids, and have your parents go to parent-teacher conferences. You don't need to see the syllabus every day. You show up and have a conversation with your teacher, which is already an option. That's how you find out what's happening in your classrooms. Trust the teacher. You sit down and talk to them, like we used to do when we were kids, and our parents took us to parent-teacher conferences. The role of the legislature is already very well established. We create committees. Those committees create the curriculum. The curriculum then gets passed. All the standards in the state of Minnesota are perfectly clear and where they are. And just to be perfectly clear at this point too, critical race theory is not in the standards. And just to be on the record here real quick, I will fight any effort to teach critical race theory in any elementary school in the state of Minnesota. And I will also fight any effort to feed them dinosaur meat, because those are equally likely. Never happened, never gonna happen. We have a process for these kinds of conversations. We have a process for figuring this stuff out. And that process is already well established in the legislature, and it works. Parents are involved in those committees. Parents are there talking about what the curriculum should be with area experts, with legislators. The process now is working fine.
Tami?
Yes, 2 years ago when I was running, I had a conversation where we were talking about the social studies curriculum and the new curriculum that was being written by the teachers and the committees and the legislative. And we looked at it, I had a chance to read through it, and it was very good. It was thorough, it was bringing forth some important issues that had been missing in the social studies curriculum. It was very good. And all of a sudden, when I was hearing the critical race theory come forward, I thought, well, I've seen that curriculum. I've seen the new social studies. It is not in there. So I don't understand what this concern is. And as Aric also stated, being a teacher for 34 years, we have asked over and over again for parents to come into the schools, come to parent-teacher conferences, come into our classrooms. They've never been told not to come in. They've always been invited in, and we have wanted them to be there. Looking at our curriculum, I've had several instances where parents have questioned some of my curriculum, and the principal would come to my room, and I'd invite the parent and the principal in, and I would show them on the board what I was doing. And the parent went from being upset and angry to understanding the full piece of that unit I was teaching, and seeing their part of their culture being included in that curriculum, and tears coming down his face as he realized that he was being included, and his child was being included in that curriculum.
Thank you. And the next question will go to you, Tami. Would you support increased gun control measures such as red flag laws and universal background checks? And just for clarification, red flag laws allow police, family members, or medical staff to petition a court to take away someone's firearms if they feel that person is a threat to themselves or others.
Thank you. This is a question and topic that I discuss quite often. My husband is a gun owner, so we have many, many conversations about this, and he has helped educate me on the details of the issues here. Red flag laws, I do agree with, and I think that they have come to a point where they're set quite well and follow the Constitution and still guarantee people's rights. So the red flag laws are good. The background checks are already in place. There are quite a few of them in place. So it comes to be more of a detail and discussion point on some of those pieces. I think what's important with our gun safety and gun ownership is gun training, accessibility and affordability. I think that that's very important. Both of my children went through gun training classes and learned that respect of the weapon and what it can do and the power of it. So those are very good. We have already, as I said, many laws on the books, and it comes down to the details and the differences. So we have to be very careful when we legislate to be sure that these laws are carefully written. And we do need to remember that it is a right, not a privilege there. We want to see a change. Studies were finally allowed to happen in 2019, so we finally have data on some of the gun violence happening, and so we can use that as we go forward with the legislation.
Aric?
I think guns are a lot like cars. They're tools, by and large. But they also have a tremendous cultural significance. People collect them, people care about them. They're important to their lives. We need to acknowledge that and appreciate that. And in so doing, we also have to realize that because you have to wear a seatbelt doesn't mean anyone's coming to take away your Ford. Because you have a speed limit, that doesn't mean someone's come to take away your Chevy. That's not the way it works. Part of our problem with our political discourse in general is we get so stuck on these absolutes. And we don't realize that there are practical consequences, practical solutions sometimes. Now when I think about guns, and red flag laws in particular, we know that Florida passed red flag laws after Parkland. Florida. We are Minnesota. We're better than that. When I think about red flag laws, I think about a story I read a couple years ago. A woman in Wisconsin and a man in Minnesota, both who had severe dementia, both killed their adult children caregivers because they didn't recognize them. We can't let that happen. You don't like red flag laws? Okay, tell me what we're gonna do. Because we can't let that happen.
Thank you. The next question begins with you, Aric. Will you vote in favor of a constitutional amendment banning abortion in Minnesota? And if so, would you allow for exceptions in the case of rape or incest?
One of the surprising silver linings of Roe and its reversal is that I think a lot of people now are realizing the complexity of the abortion issue. We're moving past pro-life versus pro-choice, and we're starting to think about people's lives in a more serious way. There is a very real chance, I would wager 100% chance, that everyone in this room knows someone who has had an abortion, whether or not you've talked to them about it or not. And maybe you haven't talked to them about it yet, because it's a deeply personal decision. A deeply personal decision that the government has no business making for you, ever. And I think about this because the day after the Roe decision was leaked, I got an email from one of our neighbors who, when she was pregnant at 5 months, found out that her child was brain dead and wasn't going to survive. Without basic reasonable protections, she would have to carry that to term. Risk sepsis in her own personal life. In Texas right now, a woman who is pregnant who gets cancer can't have chemo because it's not considered an immediate threat to her life. It's not going to be overturned constitutionally. The legislature can't do that in the state of Minnesota. But what we need to fear are rules that make it impossible, that make it dangerous, that don't protect and respect the lives of all Minnesota citizens.
Tami?
The AMA has stated that abortion is a medical procedure and therefore should be done in a safe medical environment. I believe that this is a private issue between the woman and her doctor. Never at any point should this be a government decision. And there are so many complicated issues that come up for a woman. And to be able to have that conversation with her physician is just vital. If we start putting bans on that, I fear that women aren't going to be able to access their physicians to ask them about even prenatal care or health care for their child. They're going to be fearful of that. What can I ask? What can I ask? And I believe that there are people out there, not just women, but people that don't know what our bodies do, and to be banned to not even have access to the physician to ask about that, to understand about our bodies, to learn about our bodies. How did I get pregnant? What happened? How do I prevent that? So all of those pieces are essential that come in the context with the woman having that private conversation with her doctor, and also having access to education on birth control, and respect also for both men and women to have respect with each other and with each other's bodies. So that's all part of that, and I fear that when we start putting bans on that, that education and that freedom to ask those questions will go away.
Thank you, and Tami, you're first for the next question. The Minnesota End-of-Life Options Act, modeled after the Oregon Death with Dignity Act, would allow terminally ill, mentally capable adults to receive medication from their doctor or licensed healthcare provider that they could self-ingest for a peaceful death if their suffering were to become intolerable. The bill includes safeguards against abuse. What is your position on this issue?
I had this conversation 2 years ago, and as we were talking about elder issues, and I agree with this bill, this end-of-life bill. I think that Oregon has put in place something that's very well thought through, that legislates well. And I know that Minnesota is close to being able to pass this. And I've talked to many people, committees of elder who support this and are working toward this. And I think that we need that respect in end of life. My father, when he was in a nursing home, place that he didn't want to be, really wasn't needed to be there, but that's where he ended up. And I know that he struggled being in there. And he made the choice himself to quit eating. He decided, I don't want to go down this path as he was seeing other people in the nursing home losing mental and physical capabilities. He was a very proud person. And he decided that he was going to stop eating. And that was his choice to have his end of life. He knew he had aches and pains, and he just didn't want to live that way, and he missed my mom, and so that is what he chose to do. And I struggled with that a little bit at first. And then I thought of an old Indian chief who would go out into the woods and knew his end of life was there, and that was how he respectfully ended his life. And I decided that's how my father decided to go to.
Aric.
I received a lot of correspondence about this issue over the past 2 years. A lot of people in favor of it, a lot of people against it. I think the starting point has to be that all life is precious. But an essential component of the precious nature of life is that we can choose about it. We can make the choices that we have to make as we live. And the government has very little business telling you what to do with your life, I think. And one of the challenges with this particular issue, I think, is the complexity, not just the moral complexity, but the complexity of the actual Oregon law, which, as Tami mentioned, is a very, very good law, very thorough law, very well thought through law. I think that if we took some time and we understood that bill a little bit better, that law a little bit better, and how people would like to implement it as well in Minnesota, I think we would have a more nuanced understanding of what it means, and also the issue itself. So that's what I suggest, is that a deeper understanding of the Oregon law, what it means, what it would mean in Minnesota, and I would like to support it.
And the next question will be with you, Aric. In the legislature, will you vote in support of paid family and medical leave for all employees? Why or why not?
I'm an author of this one. So probably. The thing is, when you actually get down to it, it sounds like it's a problem, but people thought unemployment insurance was a big problem years ago, and it's a tremendous success. It is the premier anti-poverty program in the entire, in our history, is unemployment insurance. And I think when that was established, people went, oh, it's going to be too expensive. That's a big deal. I've had lots of conversations with my friends who are small business owners who would love to offer this benefit, but can't afford to. The paid family leave bill that we put forward is about the price of a cup of coffee a week for paid family leave. It's not that expensive. It's just kind of scary at first, and there are a lot of people who don't want to do it. But here's the thing, there are 60,000 mothers in the state of Minnesota every year who have to go back to work when their newborn infant is 1 week old. That's not okay, people. That's unacceptable. That's not in the interest of the child, it's not the interest of the mother, it's not in the interest of the employer either. We work better when we are safe. We work better when we are happy, when we're not anxious, when we're not stressed. We're better employees. It's in everyone's best interest to pursue and to pass basic, reasonable, common sense paid family leave.
Tami.
I remember when I was working with Isaiah, this was several years ago, and I was sitting at a table when this was coming up with Senator Susan Kent, and actually Jerry Ralph was there. I can't remember if he was senator at the time, I believe he was. And his concern as a small business owner was the cost for this. And Senator Kent was explaining how that is a shared cost. And his concern again was, well, when all of a sudden I have an employee that has to leave, I have to find coverage for that employee and all the expense of that and training. And Senator Kent just looked at him and said, that's what is this, the purpose of this is so that as a small business owner, you are not dealing with those huge costs right up there. It's already embedded in that, and you can tap into that to use for your small business to help these people. So yes, I would pass this and I would approve this Paid Family Leave Act. Something else that I think about in cultures, I have good friends in Pakistan, and I watch and hear, they're working. Our work culture is so different from theirs, but when someone is sick in their family, they're off work and they're going to the hospital. They're taking, whether that is an aunt or uncle or a second cousin, they're taking them to the hospital and they are caring for them. They don't think twice about leaving work to do that.
Thank you. And you first, Tami, for the next question. What is your highest priority item for the upcoming session? And who do you seek direction from?
It would be education. There are several pieces on education that I want to work on, and they're close, and I have worked with Senator Putnam actually on these. One is the subsidy funds for our special education mandates. We have very good mandates that are brought in, and St. Cloud School District does an excellent job with our special education. However, the school board then turns to the government and says, and the money to support this, and the government says there's no money. So then our St. Cloud School District has to use from their general funds to pay for these mandates. Now, St. Cloud is, our special education program is very good, and because of that, many of the surrounding communities come to our district for special education. And unfortunately, our general budget is being borrowed against for that. And there's about $12 million that we need in our general fund to, that's borrowed to the special education funding. So that is one piece that I would like to correct, is that cross-subsidy funding for that. And there's also another piece in education, testing. But as to who I look to Senator Putnam, and I look to Representative Wolgamott. They are my political partners, and we have those discussions, and so I'm very appreciative of them.
Aric.
Thanks. I think sometimes we talk about politics, we think about really big stuff. And I'm really glad that Tami just did. She talked about big, important stuff, really big, important stuff. There's also little things, too, that are kind of important. So just as a point of contrast, I've got big ideas, too. And a lot of your big ideas are a function of the composition of your political body. So it depends on majorities, depends on chairships, and those different kinds of things, so things we'll do immediately. But one very specific priority of mine is something that I started doing last session. I was in a Zoom meeting with the Central Minnesota Sexual Assault Task Force and Human Trafficking Task Force. And listening to the stories and the work that people in our community were doing, I got off the Zoom and I thought, hey, I serve on jobs and economic development right now. Are there any programs or any sort of curriculum, any sort of resources to help people who are survivors of human trafficking get jobs in different situations? Any resources out there like that? There are none. So what did I do? I didn't write a bill. I called Cece at Terrebonne. I called my friend Charles at Anna Marie's, and I called Avivo, which is a nonprofit that does social justice work and helps people out with some of their problems. And I got the three of them together, and we worked on a bill, worked on a program where we would set up a curriculum and resources for survivors of human trafficking to get jobs and to educate employers to understand the real problems that these individuals are facing as they enter into the workforce. It's not that expensive. But it's also not a little thing, it's a specific thing. And that's going to be one of my main priorities when I go back in January.
And the next series of questions could just be yes or no, but I'm going to add why or why not to the question.
I thought we were going to run out of questions, so.
Well, we kind of did, but I have another set. So, the first question is yours, Aric. Do you support keeping our election day registration for voting? Why or why not?
May I ask a clarifying question?
Of course.
So this is just same-day registration? Oh yeah, absolutely. Because democracy.
Tami?
Yes, I do support that. Any avenues open for people to vote should be open.
And we'll just alternate. I won't remind you who's next. I might get lost. Do you believe all political contributions should be made public? Why or why not?
Yes, I believe that they should be public because that's transparency and that's government and that's democracy. And my campaign treasurer would very much love transparency.
Aric?
I think so. In the current situation, it's only contributions over $200. So anytime you give someone $200, it's always searchable in the campaign finance board reports. My one hesitation is it does sound procedurally a little bit difficult because frankly I've had probably $1,001 contributions. I think it's a great idea. Transparency, absolutely, and I hope that maybe at some other time we can talk about how else we would like to reform campaign finance law, because there's lots of other problems. But for now, I'll just go with true.
Should a citizens commission assist the legislature in redistricting? Why or why not?
Well, we didn't do it right, so yeah. It's sort of built. It's been, I think, since 1960. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. Since 1960, that the legislature actually was able to finish their job in redistricting in a reasonable way. So absolutely, I think that the citizens should be involved, and I don't think the legislature should be responsible for choosing who gets to vote for them.
Yes, I believe that the citizens should have a say in that and should be part of that commission.
Should eligible Minnesotans automatically be registered to vote while obtaining a driver's license? Why or why not?
Yes, again, elections and voting should be open to everyone, and we should make it as easy as possible for democracy, for everyone to have access to voting.
I wrote that bill too.
For you?
Do you think registered voters should be required to show a photo ID to vote? Why or why not? Aric?
Voter ID is a sham. I talked about this before just moments ago, that if you look at the different phases of, actually, can I talk for a little bit?
Of course.
I like that everyone else is like, yeah, sure, go ahead. We try to have the different phases where an election can go south are when you register, when you vote, or when you count the vote. When you vote doesn't happen. Fraud doesn't happen when you actually vote. That's the only thing that voter ID helps with, and it costs $8 million a year. So I'm not gonna spend $8 million a year taxpayer money to stop something that doesn't happen. So no, voter ID itself is just another hurdle. It's just another way to inconvenience people when they are trying to behave like good Americans. So no, I don't support it at all.
I don't support voter IDs either. On the surface it seems easy, but then when I think back, my grandmother never drove a car, so she never had a license. And then the hoops that she would have had to have gone through to have obtained some kind of an ID to do that. Might be too much to, for someone to go through those steps. And would say, I mean, the way it is now, we want to get out the vote in this election, midterm election. And so to put up any barriers that is enough for someone to say, oh, too much trouble, I'm not going to do that. I wouldn't want that to happen. So.
Do you support ranked choice voting? Why or why not?
Yes, I do. I've watched the results of that, and I feel that they're positive and eliminate some confusion, and I think it simplifies.
I do as well. I think it's especially effective in school board elections, city council elections, things like that. And it expands the number of people who can run for office. And that's always a good thing. Everyone in this room should run for office someday. Because everyone should. This is America. That's our responsibility. It's our job to participate in democracy. Ranked choice voting allows more people to run for office. It also eliminates spoiler candidates who weren't legitimate candidates, which is something we know a little bit about here.
Do you support legalizing marijuana? Why or why not?
Yes.
Yes, I do. As you look back in the history of when it became illegal, that really was a business decision and a corporation that wanted for their product to come to the forefront and wanted to reduce the product of hemp. And so when I look back on the history of it, it seemed to not have much validity in the law to begin with.
Thank you. This is the last regular question. If you were elected, what are your top 3 priorities for State Legislative District 14?
My top 3, education, public safety. It's really hard to pick top 3 because there are so many issues, and when I get involved in an issue or on a Zoom meeting, it's like, oh, that's really important. Even with the farmers or with the Second Coalition. Yes, so education, public safety, healthcare, transportation, it's a toss-up.
So this is a question, right? Like it's not a true or false kind of thing?
It's a real one.
Okay, just making sure. Well, I'm still curious about the irregular question. My priorities are the same things I've been working on for the last 2 years. I know right now we're talking about public safety and education and the economy as we should be, but I've been working on those things for 2 years. This is not an electoral pose for me. I've been working on those issues for the past 2 years, and there's lots more stuff that we need to do. So those are the 3 things that are still my priorities, but something that's really important is that we as an educated citizenry realize that tremendous overlap in these issues. You can't talk about public safety without talking about housing. You can't talk about jobs and the economy without talking about housing. And some of these other issues overlap so profoundly. You're not a safe community unless you're a healthy community. So while those are the 3 areas that I intend to work most on, the areas that I'm talking most about right now, we can't forget how much all these other issues overlap and influence and are part of the solution when we think about our future. And so those would be the 3 issues I'm most likely to focus on most, but with the understanding that they are part and parcel of a much bigger situation in which we're engaged.
Thank you. We've reached the end of our time for questions, and we've reached the end of our questions. And we'll begin closing statements. You will each have 1 minute to summarize why you believe your qualifications are well matched with the requirements of serving as a Minnesota legislator. And Aric, we're going to begin with you.
Tami and I, before we got here, were at a reception for Chief Blair Anderson. Tami Tice and Bernie Perriman were there as well. We made it here. We showed up. And this isn't the first time my opponent has not showed up for our community. I show up. I work hard. When you get to this point of your ballot, when you get to the state senate, the question isn't party. It's not left-right. It's not ideology. It's competence. I show up. I work hard. I listen. I've held 31 on Monday. I'll be back here for another town hall. It'll be my 31st in the last 2 years. 31 town halls in 2 years I've held. I have office hours in St. Cloud. First legislator I've ever known who's ever done that. Every Friday I came back from St. Paul. Instead of being with my kids and my wife, I was sitting in that office there, waiting to be part of our community. We don't get democracy without legislators who show up and do the job. I do both those things. And I'd appreciate your support this November.
As a teacher, I researched, planned, and implemented lesson plans. I have highly developed organizational skills. I developed successful classroom management, keeping students engaged, adapting lessons, meeting state standards, problem solving, negotiating conflicts, and protecting my students. I work hard, I'm organized, and I finish tasks. I love meeting people. As I have door knocked this district since March, on average of 5 days a week, I listen fully and follow up with contacts, networking, problem solving. I connect people, I get stuff done. I want to help Central Minnesota families get ahead and work together to get results. I will focus on what's best for all. I will work across party lines to get the job done for Central Minnesota. I will listen to you, not money. I do not take corporate PAC money, and I support getting big money out of politics. I will be accessible and listen. I am and have been for over 40 years committed to this community. I am Tami Calhoun, and I want to be a representative for District 14.
Thank you to members of the general public for emailing questions. Thank you, audience members, for attending and submitting written questions. Thank you to each of the candidates for running for public office and for participating in this forum. Thank you to Whitney Senior Center for the use of this room. A link to the recording of this event will be posted on the League of Women Voters St. Cloud area website, LWVSCA.org. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of the sponsor. Sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement by the sponsors of any of the candidates. And now it's up to the voters. I hope you continue to become informed about candidates and issues. Let your voices be heard by voting. Candidates, good luck on November 8th.